Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. It is amazing how time flies. I planned on doing this video 2 years ago. Now that I'm pregnant with my second child, I have no more excuses. I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but I just want to highlight the importance of prayer, confession, and peace throughout your entire pregnancy. So I'll start with the fact that my daughter came on time, on her due date, but not without a unique journey. At the time that my husband and I conceived, we were married for a little over a year. So I just remember being extremely tired around that time, so tired to the point that I remember one morning I woke up and I had all my clothes on from the previous day. At this point, my husband was like, babe, I think you should take a test. And me being stubborn and newly married, thinking that I knew everything at the time, I was just like, no, we don't need to do that. But finally, after a week of constantly sleeping and sporadic times and just being completely out of it, we got the test, and at first it was actually inconclusive. And then I took another one and it was positive, and we were super excited, super happy, because this was a time frame that we wanted to have kids. We wanted to be married for at least a year. I was super excited about like the fun stuff that you always hear about, like the belly and just having this amazing miracle happen to me. Early on, I was, enjoying the pregnancy. My daughter kind of switched my appetite a little bit. I remember that being a change. I didn't wear heels anymore because my feet started to swell pretty early, I think around like 5 months. So those were the changes that I was going through, and I had like a bump buddy who was also pregnant with me, who worked with me and who was a really good friend, so it was fun. So everything changed one day when I was walking to work. I would usually walk to work just so that I could get some exercise in. But this day I remember feeling, like a surging pain in my back. And I attested it to the fact that I was, 7 months, and maybe this was what they were talking about when they said Braxton Hicks, because at that point I had like all the books, I was watching videos, I had the apps, I was just super excited. I was just trying to, gain some knowledge about this journey that I was currently in and what to expect moving forward. So I got to work, and like the whole day I just remember feeling like this is not the will. It was just so hard, and like through every call I had to like mute the customer in between sales because I couldn't even breathe. And so me being stubborn, I didn't really say anything to anyone. I just thought that this is what you have to go through, because at that point I was in expectation for the wrong thing, which was that I was going to endure the greatest pain in my life from all the horror stories that I heard when it came time for birth. So this was just preparing me for that time. I legit thought, it'd be like a crucifixion at the end of it all, where I would die and then God would just resurrect me, and that's how it all goes for everybody. So I just endured the pain that day, and I remember, leaving and telling my supervisor, like, after this Labor Day weekend, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And so, he understood, and I went home thinking, I have a couple of days, for Labor Day. I'll just sit it out and, stay at home and just rest. And when I did that, a few days had passed, and I realized that my next appointment wasn't until the next week. So I took it upon myself to say, hey, you know what? If I feel like this in the morning on the third day, then I'm just going to go ahead and call the doctor's office, let them know how I feel, and see what happens. So the next day, nothing changed. And I remember calling the nurse, and as I'm telling her what's going on and how I'm feeling, she's like, yeah, just come in. So my husband took me to the doctor's office, and the drill, the stirrups, if you've ever been to the type of doctor I'm talking about, you know the drill. So I remember the doctor coming in, and then she went out again. And then she came in with an assistant this time. And I've actually worked in the ER, so I was kind of hip to what that meant. Usually they deliver news with someone else, like a witness in the room. And so, I was bracing myself for whatever they had to tell me. And at that point, not what I wanted to hear. So she pretty much said, okay, well, you need to be admitted. You're dilated. It's early, and that's not what we want, so you need to go to the hospital across the street. They admitted me, and they checked, and I remember the nurse putting the monitors so that you can, hear the baby's heartbeat, hear your heartbeat, and I think it's the EKG machine, I'm not really sure, but she hooked me up to it, and she looked at me and she goes, how do you feel? And I told her, I was like, I feel fine, the pain kind of subsided a little bit now that I'm here. And she was like, you don't feel that. And I said, feel what? And she goes, you're having contractions. And she shows me the sheet that you can see where it tells you like the lines that show you the contractions. And I had nothing to compare this to. This is my first pregnancy, so I immediately start to get a little anxious, like, what does this mean? And she pretty much spelled it out for me finally, where she was like, well, because you're dilated and you're actually having contractions, it's like you're going into labor. This is preterm labor because I was only 7 months. So, my husband was there, and I appreciate my husband so much. He's a type that when it's time to panic, or when it's time for what I would consider to be a moment of, oh my God, calm, cool as a cucumber. And and it actually calmed me down, because although I didn't know what to expect, it caused me to make sure that I aligned my mouth and confessed what I wanted, which was not to have this baby at 7 months and be one of those parents in the NICU. Now, finally, the week that she was due, my doctor, pretty much spelled it out for us, and he stated that we needed to make sure that she came on her due date, because if not, then within a week they would induce me. And I had done my research. I did not want medical intervention whatsoever. I planned on having a natural birth, no medication. If I could have had the baby in a birthing center, I would have, but my husband was very big on making sure we had her at the hospital. And then after the preterm labor, it was without question that I had to have her in the hospital. So the only medication that I did take was Procardia during my bed rest in order for me to stop the contractions. So what Procardia is, if no one knows, is that it's heart medicine that actually reduces the contractions that you have. That week, I remember my husband being so focused on making sure she came on time that we walked. And I remember one day, I think we walked our neighboring neighborhood, and then up the street, which wasn't just up the street. I live in Florida, so up the street is like a mile. And I did the mileage at the end of the day when I was soaking in the tub to, reduce the swelling. That it was like 5 miles. That man had me walk 5 miles. And me being stubborn and not, willing to say anything and thinking that I can do anything. In my mind, unless I'm dying, there's no reason for me not to do something. I'll do it. And then think about the repercussions later, if there are any. Personally, I think that it causes me to realize that there's more push and more that I can give in certain projects in life in general. And so it's almost like a pat on the back for me when I realize that, oh, I'm not dead yet, and I push further than I usually do. So that means I have more in me. So the night before, or maybe like a couple of nights before, I remember, going into my crazy nesting phase. Everything was pretty much set. The only thing that we got last minute was the bassinet and then a bunch of groceries to make sure that my husband had something to eat while I was in the hospital, and if anyone came over, we had things to give them. So my Pergo buddy, my bump buddy, and I, pretty much helped each other the last couple of days. I remember the night before, I went to her house to help her declutter, because she literally had like so much stuff. She had like 3 car seats, 3 play sets or playpens for the baby, and we were just like, how do we accumulate all this stuff? So I was helping her with that. And then she's very holistic. She actually wants to become a doula. So she was planning and did a natural birth in a birthing center, which was awesome. So we both were helping each other in that sense, spiritually, physically, trying to help each other as much as we can with these big bellies. And I remember her giving me like something to rub on my belly and then some tea that would help with jump-starting labor, because the next day or 2 days later, I was supposed to, you know, go into labor. We got home and I remember one of the last minute things that we had to do was build the crib. So of course my husband took care of that. I went to sleep. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and, you know, at this point, going to the restroom every 45 minutes, completely normal. In the middle of the night, it doesn't matter. When you feel the urge, get up and go. And we had just got a new mattress, and I remember my husband just like being so cautious about me not having my water break on this mattress, that every time I felt the urge, I'd go. So I went, and then I went back to sleep. But then I remember hearing like this popping sound, like a, and I don't know, at this point, if you've ever been pregnant, if you've ever known a pregnant woman and you've been that close, you just know that sometimes your body is just doing things and you are just sitting there like, I guess it's the baby. I guess it has something to do with the pregnancy. It's almost like body functions, they don't even mean anything at that point. So I remember hearing that sound, going back to sleep, and then waking up and having the urge to go again. And my husband, again, an amazing man. I couldn't ask for a better husband. He came into the bathroom and I remember him saying, "I think it's time." And I looked at him like, what do you know that I don't know? This is happening to me. Like, calm down. Let me get up and, you know, go back to sleep, and, you know, in the next 24 hours, you know, it'll happen. Don't rush it. Don't worry about it. Don't put any anxiety on me. And when I got up, I noticed, and again, I don't know who's watching, but this is not something that you necessarily want to hear if you're a little squirmy, but I noticed the bloody show where I had just went to use the restroom. And I was shocked. I was like, he really did know that it was time. And then within like a few minutes of him asking me a few questions, like, "Honey, are you okay? Are you sure that that's what it is?" I'm like, "That's blood in there. Like, that's not supposed to be in there. It never happened before." So he started timing it, and it was 15 minutes apart. My contractions were 15 minutes apart is what I'm trying to say. And I remember feeling like they were just really strong, what I would consider menstrual cramps. Since I was the age of 10, I've always had intense menstrual cramps, to the point where on the first day of my period, my mom would take me out of school. I would either call off of work. Like, it was legit always, you know, something I had to go through every month. It's not, you know, a medical condition. I later on found out while I was pregnant that I had fibroids, and it had maybe something to do with it. But this is what I would consider that pain to be. And since I've already experienced that since the age of 10, and I think when I had my daughter, I was 25, 15 years later, you know, contractions, cramps, sort of the same thing to me. So I remember them being really intense, 15 minutes apart. So then I'm willing to wait and see, because I just didn't want to go to the hospital and then have them turn me around, because the hospital wasn't close to us, but it wasn't far. You had to get on the freeway to get there, and I just didn't want the risk of having to turn around. So I remember my husband saying, "Honey, get the hospital bag, let's go. Let's be safe, not sorry." So in his own way, and this is probably the first time that I ever saw him kind of flip out, he, you know, dashes down the highway and it starts to rain. I'm getting nervous because he is not driving the speed you're supposed to be driving. So we get to the hospital in like a matter of minutes. He pulls up to the hospital, gets a wheelchair so that I can go in, and then he can turn around and go park the car. So between that time frame, I start feeling the intensity of the cramps. And I remember getting wheeled up to the ER because it's at night, and at this hospital you go through the ER to get to the maternity ward. And I used to work in that ER. This was one of the reasons why I chose the hospital. The second reason is because it had a NICU right underneath the maternity ward. And so it was very important to me that if anything was to go wrong, even though I was not speaking it, I wanted to be able to be wheeled on down to go see my baby. I did not want to be separated from her in any way. And that was actually a tip that my coworker gave me after one of her experiences where she was separated from her baby, which I did not want. So anyway, so I get wheeled in. I see the nurse that I recognize, and she recognizes me, and the person at the desk, you know, pretty much does what you're supposed to do, which is if you're pregnant past 20 weeks, you go right upstairs. Like, nobody's asking you questions. You're not going through the ER unless it's that time and the doctor has to deliver you right then and there. By the way, I've seen 5 when I used to work there. So it's possible, but I wasn't there yet. So she comes over and she talks to me, and as she's trying to ask me a few questions, I barely can speak at this point. And this is one of the things that they tell you, is that you won't be able to talk to people. Like, all your breath and all your focus is on making sure that this baby comes out and that you don't pass out in the process. So she pretty much understands, you know, she can't respond to me right now. Let me go ahead and wheel her on up. Her husband will figure out where she is because the hospital's only so big. So she takes me to the elevator and we go up to the maternity ward, and I get put in the room. So the room allows you to be able to be triaged and actually deliver in that room. Again, one of the reasons why I chose that hospital. And I remember having to use the bathroom and not wanting to leave. Like, the nurse comes in that's supposed to help me, and she's just like, honey, you need to get to the bed so we can start putting the monitors and things on you. And I just really, at that point, just wanted to stay there. Like, do I have to really move? Is there like some way that we can do this over the toilet bowl? Can we just find a way to do this over the toilet seat? So finally, I muster up enough strength to get into the bed, and you know, I have my hospital gown that I selected. By the way, I'm gonna leave a link for that particular brand down below, so you guys can check it out. The gown that I wore was called Pretty Pushers, and it allows for the monitors and everything that you have to have on you during the birth to be placed on you, but you're not exposed in the hospital gown, because a lot of hospital gowns have the back out, and I hate that. So I found a pretty one, Pretty Pushers, and I put it on and allowed the monitors and everything else to be strapped onto me and monitor the baby without me having to be completely exposed. So then we get there, and I have 2 nurses, which I thought was awesome at first. And then my husband, and I didn't want anyone else in the room. So as one nurse is doing something, the other nurse is, you know, taking care of the chart. And she's asking me questions, and the whole time I'm thinking, okay, well, I pre-registered. Like, why are you asking me questions like if I want music and if I want scents and this, that, and the third? And granted, I thought I wanted all those things when I pre-registered, but I didn't put it on the paperwork. By that time, I wanted silence. I didn't want to hear a peep unless it was the cry of a baby out of my uterus. So the nurse that was asking me questions, how can I put this? She was full of life. She was boisterous and very touchy. So it wasn't long before I had some choice words and I asked her to leave. Now my husband will probably tell you something different. It's very comical, actually. It's one of our inside jokes of how I completely lost it at that point. And that was the only time that I pretty much lost it during the whole labor process. But she didn't make the cut. The other nurse, on the other hand, who was there and stayed, she was amazing. Because I remember one of the things that they don't tell you about giving birth is that, at least for me, I could feel the movement of the baby making its way down my canal. I don't know if anyone else can say these things, but I felt it. And the natural reaction that my body had to that was to push. So when you see it in the movies, when you see it in the TV show and the woman is pushing, the woman is pushing. What they don't tell you is that you are not supposed to push until a certain time. So if it wasn't for the nurse that stayed in the room, I think that I would have messed things up. Because as I'm pushing, you can hear me pushing because I'm groaning as I'm pushing. And finally she says, stop pushing. In the back of my head, I'm like, how is that possible? Like, you must not understand that my body's automatically doing this, and how do you expect me to stop it? It's the most natural thing that could be happening right now. And I remember her saying, if you push, the reason why we don't want you to is because you will swell up. And if you swell up and you not dilate, but do the opposite, contract, I guess, then we're gonna have to cut you. We're gonna have to have a C-section. And that's all she needed to say to me. I was completely on board at that point. I was a G, because I was like, you know what? I told you I didn't want medical intervention. You're on the same page with me. You just gave me some good advice. I'm gonna hold it for as long as I can so that I don't, mess things up. So my doctor comes within like minutes, and I can hear him, because I'm on my side at this point, I can hear him getting ready, like putting his gloves on, getting scrubbed up and everything, and getting ready to do this. And I'm just like, oh, thank God. Because again, one of the things I did not want is like these hour-long labors. I've heard the craziest hour-long labors, like 72 hours, 48 hours, 36 hours. Like, why is it taking a whole day for a baby to make its way down what I would consider a short canal? And granted, I did have a short canal as one of the reasons why I ended up going into preterm labor, but to me, it didn't make any sense. And one of the things that I really used that, again, I'm going to leave the link down below, were 2 videos that I found on YouTube. So one of my mommy friends recommended that I look into hypnobirthing. And this lady I fell upon on YouTube had like this amazing video that I just could not get out of my head. Like, I watched it probably like 5 times before I finally gave birth, but I think it's from Australia, and she just had like this amazing, first of all, her title caught me off guard. And that's why I think I clicked on the video, because it was like, how to have a painless birth. What? Because before then, I didn't have a clue as to what she was talking about, and I just felt like she was lying. So I clicked on the video, and one of the things that she said was, you just have to focus on your breathing from the top of your head to the sole of your feet, and just ride the wave of pain. So what she was saying was that many of us have a tendency of recoiling and cringing when we're in pain. And what we should be doing when we're giving birth is the opposite, is that we're supposed to allow the pain to literally ride over us like a wave. So as the pain is intensifying and you feel it, it's like you just let it literally ripple over you, and it'll make things so much easier. And I think I remember someone telling me that when I would experience my menstrual cramps, years before, but she just made it make so much sense. And that was like the one hypnobirthing video that I really, really, truly used, because in the moment that you're there, you tend to forget a lot of things that you read, that you studied, that you watched. But that was one thing that stuck out to me. And my husband being there and constantly telling me to breathe was another thing, because part of hypnobirthing is the breathing. And I have a tendency that when I'm in pain, maybe I don't recoil, but I'm holding my breath. And so my husband being there actually helped me a whole lot, because he reminded me, okay, breathe and also ride the wave of pain. So I'm gonna leave her link below, but that's what I used. And then my bump buddy, she also recommended another video, and I'm gonna have to try to find this one because I don't recall it as much. I think I actually watched it after I gave birth, but the point of what she had to say in the video was still profound, which was, we're meant to do this. Like, a lot of women have a tendency of fearing birth because of the horror stories that we constantly are exposed to. And I think that people just share them because they just can't believe that they've gone through something and have lived to tell it. But in this video, she really, really makes it plain on a biblical view of how women's bodies were created to do this, and there is no reason as to why we should fear something that we were created to do. That's almost like saying I was meant to be, anything, and now I fear my very being, and that doesn't make any sense. So if I can find the video, I'll link it below. If not, the Bible itself is just full of scriptures that confirms that this is not a terrible experience. It should be an amazing experience with the least amount of pain when you pray and confess and just have a peace throughout your pregnancy. Like all the stress, all the people who say negative things, and unfortunately they do, you just gotta block it out. You just gotta continue to build an environment of tranquility while you're pregnant so that you do not have a high stress pregnancy and you don't have a high stress baby and you don't have complications. So I said all that to say that once the doctor was ready, I was ready to give birth, and he was pretty much like, okay, this is where we push. And I think I remember telling him, or maybe thinking it, that I told him, look, she's coming out in one push. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not super painful, but I don't want to be here anymore in this state. So I said one push, and he's like, all right, one push. And I pushed, and I remember hearing him say, oh wow, she has so much hair. In the back of my mind at that very moment, I was like, that's great, that's fine. Let's finish this up. And he's an amazing doctor. This is the same doctor who's gonna deliver my second child. So I am completely happy with him. He is expedient and amazing. So on the second push is when she finally came out. Yay. They don't tell you how amazing it feels to finally have the baby come out. Like that to me was like the best relief, peaceful feeling I've ever felt in my life. It was like as if you had the most intense workout of your life, and then the trainer finally says, you can stop now, you can lay down. So it was amazing. I was so happy, and it happened so fast that when I finally, looked at my husband, and he's like completely in love with this baby. We can hear her crying. She looks like his sister. Nothing to do with me. If you see her now, you'd be like, oh my God, what did you have to contribute? I don't know. So, he's super in love with her, and he's just like, I remember he kept saying, wow, babe, wow, you're such a thug. And to me, that's like the sweetest thing that you could have said to me at that moment. Like our relationship, a lot of people probably don't even understand it, but if he had said something like, babe, I love you so much, or babe, you did a great job, I would have been like, that's fine. But for him to say that I was such a thug, I thought like, I freaking love you. This is our I love you. It doesn't make any sense to anyone else. It makes sense to me. So I remember asking him, what time it is, call my mom. She didn't get a chance to make it, and my sister and everybody. And he was like, wow, that happened in like 72 minutes. So basically within an hour of us getting to the hospital, Alana was born. And I just remember the doctor working his magic down there and just getting me all stitched up, and the placenta process, like it was intense, but it wasn't painful. Like I've heard some people say that the placenta process is actually more painful than the birth. To me, it wasn't. It was just uncomfortable because they have to press your stomach to make sure all the placenta has come out. And that to me was uncomfortable, but it wasn't super painful. I just remember thinking, I'm done. This is amazing. I'm happy. So then after that, I get cleaned up and stitched up, and the baby's cleaned up and stitched up, and we just have skin to skin contact. And I think that we had like a couple of pictures taken from the nurse after I kind of, got my wits about myself again. And I got wheeled out I stayed in the room. And then my parents showed up, my little sister and brother came, and probably like an hour later, I got wheeled up to the room. And, that couple of days that we were there, I think we were there 4 days max. But the few days that we were there, we constantly had visitors, constantly had people coming. His parents drove down from Tallahassee. My sister came the next day after church, and a few friends. Alana's godmother came. My close friends came, and everyone was so happy, and they were just so amazed. They're like, what did you do? You had a baby in an hour? That's amazing, with no medication, no epidural. I said, nope, no, and no. I remember even the doctor staff being amazed. They were like, so you don't need like a Tylenol or nothing? And I'm like, no, not unless there's something wrong down there. Like, no, I don't need anything. And I don't want to say that it's because I think I'm stronger than someone else, or, you know, for women to sit there and say, oh, you just have a high tolerance for pain. I truly, truly believe, like I said in the beginning of this video, that prayer, confession, peace have so much to do with how it worked out. I'm not going to take the credit at all. That's not where it's due. So to God be the glory. It was an amazing journey. I think a day later, they took Alana for some tests, and they didn't come back on time, not right away. And I remember that they admitted her to the NICU for a few hours, which to me was like too long. But I was again thankful that it was right there, and they took her there because she wasn't eating. So I wanted to breastfeed, but she wasn't breastfeeding, and I didn't want them to give her formula. So when they realized she wasn't eating anything, they took her to the NICU so that they could put a tube down her nose and then see if they could suck out the fluid that apparently she swallowed on the way out during the birth. So thankfully, it was just a few hours. I was able to pump and give her some of my breast milk, and we were able to go home a couple of days later. But it's like I don't even know what it was like before her. She is super independent, which I love. She's sassy, which I think she gets from both of us. Even though my husband swears up and down that it's for me, I think it's from both of us. And she's the leader, and I love that. I love that adults, kids her age, kids who are older than her, just can't make her do anything or tell her what to do. Sometimes it backfires, and I have to remind her, like, hey, I'm the mama and you're the baby. But even the confessions that I say about her now, which is that she's independent, she's smart, she's intelligent, she's beautiful, she's kind. These are things that I see in her, and I'll never stop saying them because I know the power. I know the power of prayer. I know the power of confession. I know the power of keeping the peace within my household, that even if my husband and I are not seeing eye to eye, that we just don't let her see that. We don't let her around that. Like, we will have a family meeting away from her and make sure that she's taken care of before we discuss or have any harsh words between us. So that was my birthing story. And if you have any questions, if there's something I didn't go over, something that you were confused about, because I have a tendency of, thinking I'm explaining something and then it's not clear. If that happened and you're just like, I just want some more information on, then again, leave the comments below, watch, share, like, subscribe. I've got more to share. I think that this is an amazing outlet for me to be able to do just that. So in order for me to share, sometimes I need to know what you need. So that is it. That is all. Thank you again for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.